And welcome back to Sunday in America. I'm Tom Basile. For this Father's Day, next Saturday, I'll be reading and signing my new book, Tough Sell, Fighting the Media War in Iraq. Has a foreword from Ambassador John Bolton. I'll be at the Tyson's Corner, Barnes & Noble from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday, June 24th. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, please come out, and it would be a pleasure to meet you. You know, this week, as we've been talking about, was a sobering one for many people on Capitol Hill. And while the Russia investigation circus continues to occupy a great deal of attention, the Trump White House is trying to stay focused on the president's core priorities and campaign promises. One of those, a massive infrastructure proposal, which could be a real catalyst for jobs and economic growth. But it also might be something that could finally win over some Democrats in both houses. The president has outlined some very broad strokes of that proposal. Joining me to discuss it and its prospects for passage in some form, Congressman John Faso. Congressman Faso sits on the House Budget, Transportation, and Infrastructure and Agriculture Committees. He also represents New York's 19th Congressional District. He's a former minority leader of the New York State Assembly, where he earned a reputation as a strong fiscal leader who pushed proposals that led to balanced budgets, and including the first reduction in state spending in over 5 decades while closing a $5 billion budget deficit. He also championed the state's property tax exemption program. Congressman Faso, welcome to Sunday in America.
Good morning, Tom. Great to be with you, and I have to say I look forward to reading your book.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Congressman. I very much appreciate it, and a happy Father's Day to you. So I have to ask you first about your feelings about the shooting this week. What were your thoughts when you first heard the news?
Shock. I was not a member of the baseball team, and for reasons which have to do with my poor preparation and fielding and hitting skills. So I never joined the baseball squad, but it's a very good-natured, friendly rivalry between Democrat and Republican members of Congress. And I was just shocked, as all of my colleagues were on both sides of the aisle, as to what happened last week. It was something that you just never would have imagined taking place. And Steve Scalise, we all pray for his recovery and the recovery of the others that were injured in this situation where this deranged shooter came and tracked these members down and fired at them. And thank God the Capitol Police were there. And the only reason the Capitol Police were there is because Steve Scalise, as the third-ranking member in the House, is entitled to have a security detail. The top 3 Democrat and top 3 Republicans in the House receive security protection around the clock when they're out there.
Congressman, and you represent a district that's widely considered a swing district, and you've had some aggressive tactics by the left used against you. Do you feel safe? Do you feel that this environment at times, does it make you nervous at all?
It really doesn't. I feel safe, certainly in my district as I travel around. Yesterday I was at a number of community events throughout my district in the Mid-Hudson Valley and Catskills of New York State. But I also make a practice not to publicly discuss some of the security concerns in terms of things that are affecting me and my district office staff. Because certainly I don't want to encourage copycats. And the bottom line here is that we all need to take extra precautions in this environment. We remember when Congresswoman Giffords was almost killed back in 2011. And that was she was, adversely affected. She will be for the rest of her life because of that injury, and was required to resign from Congress. And just as much shock and anger that I think members felt then, we feel today. And so certainly I think members are going to take enhanced efforts to make sure that they and their families and their staffs are protected, and everyone should look at enhanced security measures for their offices around the country and in their districts. So, but I do think that the fact is that the rhetoric on both sides has gotten excessively overheated, and I think part of this is because we live in an age with social media and with mass media where people kind of go into their respective corners.
Right.
They don't really listen to what the other side is saying, and sometimes people on the fringes who may have mental problems or other emotional efforts or disturbances on their part, sometimes those people will go off kilter, and the result regrettably was the result we saw the other day in Alexandria, Virginia. So I think it behooves everyone in a leadership position, from the president on down, to consider the impact of their words and make sure that people understand. A lot of times people at home think that Democrats and Republicans are all constantly at war with each other in Washington. And certainly while we have stark philosophical and partisan differences, in many instances we're working cooperatively on issues. And I think in the beginning of the segment here, you mentioned the opportunity on infrastructure. There is, I think, genuine opportunity on infrastructure to get some things done on a bipartisan basis. And the country would be better off if we had more bipartisan efforts. Compromise is not a dirty word. I stand for my principles. But, like Ronald Reagan said, if he could get 75 or 80% of what he wanted, that was worth a deal to take.
Yeah.
And the very nature of our system, the constitutional nature, the cumbersome nature of our system, is one that is based on compromise. Our founders came from a parliamentary system like they have in England, where if you have a majority in Parliament, you can pretty much ram through whatever you want.
Right.
And our system is intentionally made to be cumbersome. You've got two houses. You've got a different type of representation in the House and the Senate. Then you've got the executive. You've got the veto. You can only override that veto with 2/3 vote in each house. So our system was structured to be cumbersome and difficult to get things done. And, we as Republicans know that we were sent to Washington to get things done. Tax reform, health care reform are very high on my agenda. As you mentioned, I sit on the Budget Committee. We've got to get a budget resolution through the House. That's something that will attract support from all sides within the Republican Party, because the budget resolution is the vehicle that we intend to use to enact a tax reform bill. Now, so I think sometimes people out around the country think, well, they're not doing anything. Well, it is very difficult, as the president notably said on health care. It is complicated.
Well, look,
but that
passing
still
legislation
doesn't excuse it.
Legislation is and all the back and forth that's involved in the process between the House and the Senate. I mean, it's in a country where everybody is, people are fixated on social media, and they want everything now. They want it done yesterday. You have a media that is driven by sensationalism. It does look like it takes forever, but as you say, that was part of the founders' intent. So let's talk about this infrastructure proposal, and we are speaking with New York Congressman John Faso here on Sunday in America. This is something that the president promised during the campaign, to rebuild America. Being from New York, I'm sure that you realize that we do have an aging public infrastructure. The president attempted to roll this thing out. I happen to believe that it was sort of a mistake to start off by talking about privatizing the air traffic control system. How do you feel about the privatization, and how do you feel about sort of the broad strokes of this $200 billion to $1 trillion plan that has been rolled out by the White House?
Sure. Let's deal with both of those. The air traffic control, we have in the U.S. a very safe air traffic control system, but its technology is antiquated, and the FAA, despite many millions of dollars and many years of trying, has not been able to effectively implement the modernization of air traffic control. In contrast, in Canada, and And a number of us, led by Chairman Schuster, went up to Ottawa a few weeks ago, about 20 members, Democrat and Republican, to look at and speak to the officials of Canada and also from the nonprofit organization that was set up to actually run air traffic control. And for 21 years, the Canadians have successfully had a privatized system where there's a proper governance model from the government and also the private carriers and the general aviation community, as well as the unions. And ironically, in the United States, the Air Traffic Controller Union, and this is highly unusual, the Air Traffic Controller Union is very open to the Canadian model. And what most countries do, they separate the operation of air traffic control from the oversight or safety operation of air traffic control. And that's precisely what they do in Canada. The government oversees the safety of the system, but the technology and the workforce and the decision-making is much more nimble in the nonprofit organization that they set up to actually run air traffic control within Canada. So this has been something that's been debated for a couple of years now. The main opposition to doing a privatized system in the U.S. comes from the general aviation community, which fears that they will be kind of put to the back of the line when it comes to the decision-making on traffic control versus the major airlines. What the Trump administration proposal attempts to do, they attempt to give equal weight to the major airlines and general aviation in the board that would be running this. So most countries, Tom, actually do separate the oversight of the air traffic system and the safety of the air traffic system from the operation. So in the U.S., the operation and the oversight is combined under the FAA. So when there is a safety lapse, when there is an issue that might arise, you basically have the same agency investigating another part of itself. So that's part of the theory. So whether this can succeed or not, I think as of right now, it's an open political question. There is some opposition among Democrats who just oppose all privatization, but there's also some opposition among some Republicans who are aligned with the general aviation community. So how this shapes out still remains to be seen. But I do think people should take an in-depth look. The Canadians, by the way, since for 21 years have been doing this exceedingly successfully, and their technology is much more advanced than the United States.
Let's try to talk about the rest of the plan and the remaining couple of minutes. I know you have a commitment, and the president. I have a Father's Day commitment, and I don't want to keep you from that. But the president proposed it's a $200 billion plan over 10 years with presumably incentives for private investment that would bring the total to about $1 trillion. It's still kind of light on details. There is not enabling legislation just yet. But this is an opportunity for bipartisanship and for real, job creation here. How would you like to see this advance and structurally?
I'd like to see it advance. The $200 billion that would be federal resources over 10 years. And the major difficulty we have at the federal level is the federal government's basically broke, and we have extraordinary difficult fiscal constraints upon the United States. So the president is proposing the $200 billion to leverage another $800 billion in private sector capital. Now, this is also done across the world. The Australians do it. The Europeans do it. They bring private sector capital. The investors of that private sector capital get a rate of return to justify the investment. But there are many billions, indeed trillions, we are advised of foreign capital that would like to come to the safe harbor of the United States for investment in public infrastructure. There are major projects that we really need to do from the standpoint of the economic viability of our country. Here in the Northeast, for instance, the Gateway Project, which is a twin tunnel between New Jersey and New York, is critical for bringing not only commuters but long-distance passengers in and out of New York City. Hurricane Sandy had greatly damaged the two existing tunnels, so we need to build these two new tunnels. The Trump plan, as it has been outlined for us, and you're correct that they haven't given us a detailed legislative proposal, but the Trump plan attempts to basically use public resources to leverage private resources coming in. That Gateway project in and of itself is about a $15 billion major infrastructure project, which is key to the economic viability of not just the New York City metropolitan area, but the entire Northeast corridor. So there are similar projects around the country. I would like to see a system whereby we fund the existing programs, water and sewer revolving loan funds, the highway trust fund, to do projects that municipalities and states have on the drawing boards that we could move forward with, but also to highlight some key critical national infrastructure projects like that Gateway project. And I think the Trump proposal is a step in this direction.
Terrific. And we appreciate your insight. We will check back with you, and you're going to play a key role in this, given your committee assignments over these next coming months. And hopefully we will be able to see some bipartisan movement on this. Again, enormous amount of potential to create jobs across the country and restore our aging public infrastructure. Congressman John Faso, happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you, Tom, and happy Father's Day to everyone out there in your audience. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us on Sunday in America. I'm Tom Basile. When we come back, Arthur Wheaton, one of the directors of the environmental programs at the Worker Institute of Cornell University, will talk about the president's job training proposal, which he unveiled this past week as well. Again, you're listening to Sunday in America. We will also take your calls, 866-957-2874. I'm Tom Basile. Don't go away.